Prithvi, I can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. Today is a special session for all of us because it is specifically and exclusively only for the young members of the bar. And we thank Aditya Reddy sir for, for volunteering to come forward and give us this lecture. I mean, we've been listening to a lot of in-depth knowledge on GST, but then the basic concept is also very important for us to understand what is GST. So we thank Aditya Reddy sir once again for volunteering to take up this session. So this is a interactive session. So at the end, please don't hesitate in asking any questions. You can clear any whatever doubts you have, so that we get to understand the subject better. So thank you everyone for joining us again, and thank you, sir. So you can start now.
I'll start, but because I'd like to make it clear that I'd like this to be interactive. So if people want to ask questions even in the middle also, let them. Okay.
Sure. The access to unmute yourself lies with you itself. So anyone who wants to ask question, you can just unmute yourself, and you can stop, sir, and then you can ask your questions also. But then don't don't keep interrupting very often. You can just raise your hands, and then we can do. There'll be a separate question answer sessions also. So thank you once again. So we can start, sir.
Thanks. So first of all, I'd like to tell you all that this is only a knowledge sharing session. There is no teaching here, because this whole thing is as new to me as to anybody, to any of you all. So in that sense, I am I'm a junior anyways, but I am as much a junior as any of you all as far as this topic is concerned. Because as basically as a sales tax lawyer and a VAT lawyer, when I first there is a sea change. There's a world of a difference between almost every aspect of the law when you compare it with the erstwhile VAT regime and the GST regime, and especially the provisions that I'm going to deal with right now are totally different. Some of them are taken from the central excise and service tax regime, but some of them are different, not there even in that regime. So that way, a lot of it is new for everybody. So as I said, let us share our knowledge, and anytime there is a doubt or you think there is a mistake or there's something that I am saying can have another view also, please point out. So the reason I've chosen the topic for today discussion: audit, assessment, and recovery. Now this so to understand the significance of these topics and why they are bundled together, I would like you all to look at the definition, or not the definition, the levy under the GST Act itself, which is contained in Section 9 of the Act. So this is the levy. So most of you all may know that the Supreme Court, in many decisions, including Govind sir and Ganga sir, etc., has said that any levy has to have 4 components. So if you look at this, the definition, the description of the levy under Section 9 of the GST Act, you will be able to identify the 4 components. I'll just read it to you all. CGST on all intrastate supplies. So intrastate supplies are the incidence of tax. That is the trigger for the tax. Whenever there is an intrastate supply of goods and services, or both, except on alcoholic liquor, or that is an exception. On the value determined under Section 15. So value determined under Section 15 is the measure of tax. On what amount is the tax levied? Aparna ma'am and Raghavan sir, etc. have already dealt with valuation, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, so that is the measure of tax. And then you have, at such rates not exceeding 20% has been notified by the government. This is the rate of tax. The rate of tax on the measure of tax. And the 4th component of the levy is the taxable person, on whom is the tax levied, which is there in the last part of the section. So these are the 4 components of any levy. Now, if you look at the levy itself, there will be nothing about the manner of collection of this levy. All of that is provided under what is called the machinery provisions. So what we will be dealing with today, audit, assessment, and recovery, are what are called the machinery provisions. A part of the machinery. There are many other machinery provisions, but these are the major part of the machinery provisions under any tax law, and GST, they are especially significant. So we look at some basic definitions before we go into the concept. A taxable person is defined under section 202.107 as any person who is registered or is liable to be registered under the GST Act, basically section 22 or section 24. Now this will be important when we look at, because the assessment is divided into different categories, and the distinction between a registered person and a non-registered person becomes significant under some heads of assessment. So assessment itself is defined under section 211 as follows. See, it means determination of tax liability under this act. So the word determination of tax liability mean assessment under general law. If you look at the definition of assessment as laid down by the Supreme Court in any context, not just GST and right from the beginning, then the word determination of tax liability is the crucial component of assessment. What is further, what is additional in the GST definition is, they mention the different kind of assessment that is prescribed under the Act. Now you should note that this is inclusive and includes the following assessments. Assessment means determination of tax liability under that, and includes a self-assessment, reassessment, provisional assessment, summary assessment, and best judgment assessment. Now these are the different kinds of assessment that are contemplated under the GST Act, and each of them, the circumstances under which each of them arise, we will look at now. Now, the reason why it is inclusive is, like I said, the crux of assessment is determination of liability. And the most unique feature of the GST Act is that the assessment provisions are separate and the provisions for determination of liability are separate. We will look as to the distinction and why they are like that. But what is important is that there are two separate set of provisions for assessment and for determination of liability. But in the generic sense, in a legal sense, both of them form part of the assessment provisions. Even determination of liability by its very definition forms part of assessment. So under section 211, even the provisions regarding determination of liability fall under the definition of assessment. So the first, you look at the definition of 211, there are 5 different kinds of assessment. The first kind of assessment is self-assessment. Now, self-assessment is described under section 59. It is the simplest form of assessment and will be the least troublesome because it is based on trust. Now, this was introduced sometime in the early 90s in the central excise regime, and it has been in the VAT regime right from the beginning, and came sometime late in the earlier sales tax, the general sales tax regime, basically where you are assessed based on your returns itself. So every registered dealer, every registered person shall self-assess the tax. This is the description under 59(1). Every registered person shall self-assess the taxes payable under this Act and furnish a return for each tax period as specified under section 39. So section 39 prescribes the different kinds of returns for a regular taxpayer, for a composite taxpayer, for a non-resident taxpayer, for a TDS taxpayer. So for each of these persons, there are different kinds of returns, and under section 59, you are automatically assessed based on whatever figures you report in your returns. If you are not subject to any of the other assessments which we are going to see, then your assessment is final. Subject to the limitations that are provided in those respective assessments, your assessment is final and you will be assessed based on whatever you report. That is self-assessment. Now, to just give you an idea of what it was like before the self-assessment concept came in taxation, the earlier general sales tax law, a dealer had to file his returns, and every dealer had to get his returns scrutinized at the end of the assessment year by the assessing officer and get an assessment order. Now that was, might have been okay till the time, businesses proliferated in India, from the 90s, etc. But after that, it simply became impractical. So that is why the concept of self-assessment had to be introduced. Now this is the section 59 itself is similar to Rule 6 of the Central Excise rules, which talks of self-assessment, and similar to section 22 of TN VAT Act. Section 22 of TN VAT Act talks of deemed assessment. in the sense that it is not automatic immediately after filing of your returns, but it is deemed to be assessed on the basis of your returns at a particular on a particular date after the assessment year. So they are similar but not exactly the same. But Rule 6 of the Central Excise Rules are exactly the same as Section 59. As I said, it is based on trust. There will be no separate assessment order issued to you. It is immediate and automatic. Now, as most of us know, the problem comes only because the assessing officer of the department is not as trusting as we expect them to be, and matters are taken up for scrutiny. Now, before scrutiny, there is one more very important kind of assessment, which is taken from the central excise regime, exactly from the central and the service tax regime. There are similar provisions in both laws, which is provisional assessment. Now, like we saw in the definition of levy under Section 9, there is the measure of levy and there is the rate of tax. That is the value of the goods under Section 15 and the rate of tax as notified by the government. Suppose an assessee has a doubt with respect to what should be the rate of tax or what should be the value of this commodity. Say this month you have to file your returns and you are not sure, and you have started some new business or you are dealing with some product about which you are not sure as to its rate of tax or about its valuation, then you have an option, the assessee has an option to make an application or to write to the assessing, to the proper officer, to the assessing officer, asking him to assess him provisionally. That is, assuming that the assessing, you assume that the proper officer also will not be sure about what should be the rate of tax and what should be the value, and ask him to assess you provisionally. And the proper officer, on receipt of such an application, will pass an order within 90 days. He can do two things. He can either refuse your application. On what grounds can he refuse? Obviously, on the ground that there can be no doubt. Since you are raising a doubt, the assessing officer can say, no, there can be no doubt. This is the rate of tax. This is the valuation. So please value it this way, and I'm rejecting your application because there is no ambiguity. Or he can accept your application and say, see, even I am not sure, you're right. You please pay tax at this rate provisionally for now, but this payment that you make is subject to a final assessment for which there is a separate procedure given. Now, these are the two orders that the proper officer can pass. Now, once a proper officer passes an order accepting the provisional assessment and saying, okay, now pay some tax provisionally. For example, say, we'll take this example throughout. Suppose, say, you're dealing with chocolate, and the question is whether chocolate is taxed at 5% or 18%, and you are not sure about it. Then and even the proper officer is not sure after you make the application for provisional assessment. He can say, okay, since you are doubtful, please pay tax at 5% for now, but this is subject to final assessment. Now, the section mandates that anytime, if you have to pay this tax provisionally, then you also have to give a bond. Yes, proper officer, it's a mandatory provision. The proper officer will have to take a bond from you saying, tomorrow, if in the final assessment, if it is found that the chocolates are actually taxable at 18%, then you must give an undertaking that you will pay the balance 13%. Now, this undertaking is taken in the form of a bond. The proper officer is also empowered to take security in the form of a bank guarantee. Now, the rule prescribes that the rule 98.3 prescribes that this security cannot be for more than 25% of the value of the anticipated difference. Now, here, like the example that I told you, the difference is 13% between what you are provisionally paying at 5% on chocolates and the probable final assessment, which may be at 18%. The difference is 13%. So, the assessing officer, the proper officer, can ask for security from you only for a maximum of 25% of this difference, 25% of the 13%. Now, this is his discretion, but he has no discretion in taking a bond. Only with respect to the security, he has discretion. Now, as I said, the section itself says the purpose of the bond is to bind the taxable person for payment of the difference tax, as and when it may arise at the time of final assessment. Now, all this is provided under Section 60. So now, Section 60 itself provides for the manner of final assessment. Now, after the
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. I think there is one query from
yes.
Mr. Sedu. Sir,
Yes.
Mr. Sedu, you can actually, you yourself can unmute and ask.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I am Sedu from Coimbatore.
சொல்லுங்க சார்.
இப்போ நீங்க ப்ரொஃபஷனல் அசஸ்மெண்ட் பத்தி சொன்னீங்களேங்க சார்.
ஆமாங்க சார்.
இப்போ ப்ரொஃபஷனல் இப்போ வந்து நமக்கு வந்து அட்வான்ஸ் ரூலிங் இருக்கிறதுனால 10,000 rupees ஃபீஸ் கட்டினா அட்வான்ஸ் ரூலிங் இமிடியேட்டா கிளாரிஃபிகேஷன் கிடைச்சிருது. அப்ப நம்ம சென்ட்ரல் எக்ஸஸ் மாதிரி ப்ரொஃபஷனல் அசஸ்மெண்ட் போக வேண்டிய அவசியம் இல்லைங்க சார்.
கரெக்ட் சார், தேவையில்லை. இன்ஃபேக்ட் இதுல நிறைய டிராபேக்ஸ் இருக்கு, அதுவும் சொல்றேன். So it is always better what the thinking is absolutely correct. So the idea is to clarify your doubt as to the rate of tax. You can always, there is an option to go for advance ruling. But see, this is an option available to the LC. As I said, provisional assessment is only at the instance of the assessee. So,
Okay.
This is an option available. You can choose. Now, I will tell you at the end of this why there may be some reasons why it is not. It may not be advisable for LCs to go for provisional assessment. When we complete this, we will probably understand it ourselves.
Okay, sir. Please, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, final assessment has to commence immediately after the assessing officer passes the provisional assessment order. Now, remember, the assessing officer has only passed a provisional assessment order where he himself is not sure as to what is the rate of tax. Now, he has to now decide the issue finally within 6 months. Within 6 months, and pass a provisional assessment order, pass a final assessment order saying finally as to whether you have to pay tax at 5% or 18% on the chocolate. Now, the only catch here is, if it was just 6 months, it is okay. But the Act allows this 6 months to be extended by another 6 months by the Joint Commissioner and Additional Commissioner, and by another 4 years by the Commissioner. So, you have a situation where today you have paid tax at 5% on chocolates, and you are happy, you are continuing to pay at 5% provisionally, and after 5 years, you are faced with a situation where you have to cover the difference and pay a huge amount of 13% more on your entire turnover for 5 years. Now, this difficulty is compounded by the fact that the section specifically contemplates interest for this entire period of 5 years in case you have to pay more. Now, this is a marked departure from the earlier regime, because the courts had interpreted this interest provision to mean payment of interest only after the final assessment order has been passed. Now, that was the Bombay High Court decision in Ispat Industries case in 2010, 259 ELD 662. And there are several sestat orders. But the section 60 specifically says that you are liable to pay for the difference from the date on which you were liable to pay, on the date on which you are supposed to pay, that is the date on which you are supposed to file your return and paid the tax, your GST or 3B, which is basically the 5th of the following month. Suppose you sell your chocolates this month, next month 5th you should have paid your tax. Now, next month you applied for provisional assessment and paid it provisionally. After 5 years, you get a final assessment order saying not 5%, 18%. So you should pay interest from the 5th of next month till the next 5 years. If you understand what I'm saying, because the section specifically says you have to pay interest irrespective of whether you paid before the final assessment order or after the final assessment order. So it clarifies that the interest liability accrues from the date on which you are originally liable, the date on which you are supposed to file your GST or 3B, your return. So this is an additional burden on the assessees. So like Mr. Setu said, the assessees may want to avoid this provision altogether, and if they have any doubt, they may take the advance ruling route. Now, there is also provision for refund, which interestingly provides for refund only from the date of the final assessment order. Because the provision says you have to, the date of interest on refund will be from the day 60 days after the date on which you make the application. When can you make the application? Only after you get the final assessment order. That is, suppose say you provisionally you pay 18%. This is the case where you provisionally, the proper officer says, no, you pay 18% only on chocolates now. But tomorrow in final assessment, if it is found to be 5%, we will return that 13% back to you. Then you pay your 18% now. You wait for 5 years for your provisional assessment, and after 5 years, you get an order, final assessment order saying no, you have to pay only 5%. You have been paying 13% unnecessarily extra. The department will return this 13% to you, but the interest will be paid only for the period after the 5 years. After the time, after the day, 60 days after the date you make the application of the final assessment order. So here also there is an element of unfairness with respect to the SSC. So I have not gone into the constitutionality aspects, Article 14 arbitrariness aspects, etc. Because all laws have always prescribed different rates of interest with respect to refund, lesser rates of interest with respect to refund, as opposed to interest on tax due from the SSC. So I haven't gone into the constitutionality aspect, but there is an element of unfairness here, which also may prompt SSCs not to take this provisional assessment route. So as I said, the provisional assessment provision under section 60 is similar to rule 8 of the central excise rules and rule 6.4 of the service tax rules. Now there are some brief legal issues that came up in the central excise and service tax regime, which I just point out with respect to provisional assessment. When provisional assessment is sought on one issue, all issues in the relevant assessment shall be treated as provisionally, issued. This is important because suppose, as I said, your doubt is only with respect to chocolates as to whether they are 5% or 18%. But you are also dealing with biscuits. Then when you apply for a provision, but remember both of them are part of the same returns filed by you, and there is no concept of assessment for separate issues or separate commodities. So when you apply for provisional assessment for chocolates, even though you have no doubt about biscuits, that is also open to final assessment. Suppose you pay for biscuits at a particular rate, being sure that it is only say 12%. On final assessment, it is open to the department to reopen that issue also and say, no, you should have paid at 18%. So there is no concept of provisional assessment only for a particular issue. Another issue is, once you made the provisional assessment and the assessing officer says, yes, correct, there is a doubt here, I will accept your request and pass a provisional assessment order saying, you pay tax on chocolates at 5% or 18%, whatever he decides should be the provisional rate. Can you challenge this saying, no, but there is no doubt now? See, I am very sure, because say, for example, subsequently some high court gives a decision that chocolates are taxable only at 5% and not 18%. Can you withdraw the provisional assessment request, or can you challenge the provisional assessment order saying no, it shouldn't have been a provisional assessment order because now the issue is clear? Now there is an old decision under the Sea Customs Act, really old law, saying that once you make a provisional assessment order, you cannot go back on it and you cannot challenge it later. But I doubt it, because if, as I said, in some collateral proceeding or in some other proceeding, the issue becomes clear, there is no reason why an assessee should not have the option to opt out of the provisional assessment proceedings. But this may be a matter of litigation, has to be looked at. Then another important thing is that the section doesn't contemplate hearing for the assessee. I think the rationale is you yourself have a doubt. That is why you have come to the department, right? What is the point of giving you a hearing? There is a provision at the provisional assessment stage to ask for a reply from the assessee only with respect to any information on record or records that are sought. That may be sought by the assessing officer, but there is no provision for a hearing or for any objections. Similarly, even at the more importantly, at the final assessment stage also, there is only a provision to ask for records. The assessing officer has to ask for records from you, but he need not ask any objections. As I said, the rationale seems to be that you yourself are not sure, which is why you have come to us. What is the point of giving you a hearing? Now, I don't know if that is the correct approach also. That has to be examined. Then there's a CESTAT ruling which says any provisional assessment can only be prospective, which means that suppose for this month, you are going to ask for a provisional assessment with respect to chocolates on whether it's 5% or 18%. And last month, you have already filed your regular returns. and you have been assessed, self-assessed for last year, not last month, for last year, say at 5% or at 18% at the higher rate, you cannot take the benefit of any future final assessment and say, see, I already paid at 18%. Now, please treat that also as provisional. No, provisional assessment can only be from the date on which you make the provisional assessment, not with respect to any concluded assessment, even if you have done it wrongly. Understand? Even if you have paid the higher amount of tax wrongly. So that another issue is whether an order refusing provisional assessment is appealable or no. Now, like I said, suppose the assessing, it should be appealable because say the assessing officer finds that there is no ambiguity with respect to whether 5% or 18% has to be paid on chocolates. It is only the higher rate, 18%. Therefore, I reject your request. But the assessee is quite sure that there is some doubt. Then definitely he can challenge this order before the appellate authority and say, see, there is this ambiguity and I went for provisional assessment. But the assessing officer says, no, it is very clear. It is only the higher rate of tax. You please hold that it is only provisional. It should be assessed provisionally because there is an ambiguity, and send it back to the assessing officer for provisional assessment. That is possible because Section 107 of the GST Act says any order under this law, under this act, is appealable. There is no exclusion with respect to assessments, provisional assessment orders. Similarly, where there is a final assessment order saying it should only be at 18%, say chocolates are taxable at only 18%, but now the assessee is sure that it should only be 5%, say for example, because some other high court has decided subsequently in some other way, then definitely it should be open for you to challenge the final assessment order also, though initially you had doubts and you went for provisional assessment. Section 107 makes any order under the GST Act appealable. Then interest to be paid, as I said, interest under the excise regime was held to be payable only from the date of the final assessment order, but under the GST Act there's a departure. It is payable from the date on which you originally become due, that is the date on which you file your returns. So there could be a lag of as much as 5 years for a period for which you may have to pay your interest. Now, these are some of the legal issues that may arise with respect to provisional assessment, and these are some of the issues which may prompt an assessee to avoid this route altogether and go for advance ruling if at all he has any doubt. Now, so this is provisional assessment. So we've completed two kinds of assessment. One is self-assessment and the other one is provisional assessment. Now, these two are at the instance of the assessee itself, and where the basic element of trust between the assessee and proper officer is assessing officer, the department is maintained. Now comes the kind of assessment where this trust is breached and the proper officer or the assessing officer has reasons to doubt the assessee's returns. Now, that happens when the assessing officer takes up the returns for scrutiny. Now, as I said, unlike the old GST regime, general sales tax regime, where every return had to be scrutinized and then only it was deemed to be assessed. Once the self-assessment system started under the excise law, under the VAT law, the provision for scrutiny is at random. The proper officer will randomly decide. At least technically it's supposed to be random, legally it's supposed to be random, but we know how assessing officers function and we know how they are taken up for scrutiny. But legally, randomly returns are taken up for scrutiny, dealers' returns are taken up for scrutiny. And on scrutiny, if the proper officer finds that there are any discrepancies in the return, say for example, any example, suppose say you are selling laptops and laptops should have been charged, tax should have been paid at 18%, but you paid only at 5%. Then that's a discrepancy, and the assessing officer will write to you saying that, see, you should have paid tax at 18% on laptops, but you paid only on 5%. Is there an explanation? Now, this is important because, like I said, there is a distinction under the GST Act between determination of liability and assessment. So here, if the assessing officer is not satisfied with your explanation that laptops are taxable only at 5%, then he cannot pass an order straight away. He has to take recourse to one or the other provisions mentioned under Section 67, which are 65, 66, 67, 73, and 74. Now, we will not be dealing with section 66 and 67 because they form a subject matter of separate, they deserve a separate presentation altogether, search, seizure, investigation, etc. But 65 is basically 65 also, sorry, 65, 66, 65, 66, 67, we will not be dealing with because they deal with, basically what happens is that if the assessing officer is not satisfied with your explanation after scrutinizing your returns, he can go further and investigate you by invoking any of these provisions which deal with issuing summons to you, asking you to appear before him, coming for a surprise check on your premises, investigating you in any of the manners provided under the Act, and discover the truth. Suppose, for example, it is not a clear case like as to whether 5% or 18% has to be taxed, and is a case where there is something suspicious in your returns. Say, for example, in your last month return, you had only sold 100 laptops, but in your this month return, suddenly you have sold 1,000 laptops. Then the assessing officer may have some doubt regarding what is happening in your business. Is there something hanky-panky? Then what he can do is, he will write to you asking, why have you sold 1,000 this year? There seems to be some discrepancy. You can reply saying, the market suddenly, I got this fantastic order from a big client. So my, my supply shot up. You can give some explanation. But if the assessing officer is still doubtful, then he can invoke any of the provisions, 65, 66, 67, and investigate you further. Now, as I said, those provisions can be dealt with in a separate provision because they are elaborate and a lot of complexity is there also. But the last two sections mentioned here are important, we'll be dealing with today, which is, if he is not satisfied with your explanation under section 61 with respect to the discrepancy, he can straight away determine your liability by invoking the provision under 73, which contemplate a further opportunity to you. So when we look at 73 and 74, we will look at what is the procedure under for determination of liability also. But what is important to note here is that no order needs to be passed on scrutiny of returns. He will have to invoke the procedure under 65, 66, 67, 73 or 74. Now that is scrutiny of returns. He has scrutinized your returns, found some discrepancy, you have not been able to satisfactorily explain, and he invokes any of those provisions. The next kind of assessment is best judgment assessment. If you look at the definition of assessment, the five definitions, then the next kind of assessment is the five concepts of assessment mentioned in the definition of assessment in 211 of the Act. The next concept is best judgment assessment. Now, this has always been there. This has also been a scope of a lot of litigation and a lot of case law because as to what is the meaning of best judgment assessment. Now, we'll just briefly look at when best judgment assessment arises under the GST Act. It arises under two circumstances. One is under section 62, where if a taxable person does not file his returns within 15 days of the notice under section 46. What is section 46? Now, section 39 and section 45 talk about the returns that need to be filed and also the time limit within which you have to file those returns. Basically, for a regular taxpayer, a return called GSTR 3B has to be filed on the 5th of the next month, sorry, on the 20th of the next month, disclosing your entire tax liability and remitting your tax. Now, under section 46, the assessing officer, a proper officer, is required to give you, if you have not done this, if you have not filed your returns, your GSTR 3B on the 20th of the following month, the proper officer can give you a notice saying, see, look, you have not filed your returns, please file it within 15 days. Even after 15 days, if you have not filed it, then section 62 kicks in, best judgment assessment kicks in. That is one circumstance under which section 62 kicks in. The second best judgment assessment kicks in. The second circumstance under which best judgment assessment kicks in is under section 63, where a person who is required to obtain registration under section 22, that is a person who has a turnover that is higher than the threshold required for registration under the Act, or he fulfills the various circumstances mentioned under section 22 for registration, but still does not take registration, or if the registration has been cancelled under section 29(2). Section 29(2) provides cases where a dealer's registration is cancelled for some fault of his. For example, if he has not filed his returns beyond a particular point of time, etc., etc. There are 5 or 6 circumstances under 29(2). So, for any of these circumstances, your registration is not valid, but still you have done business. Still there is a turnover. Then section 63 kicks in and a best judgment assessment applies. So, if you look at the commonality between 62 and 63, it is that there are no returns available for the proper officer to scrutinize. 62, you are registered, but you have not filed your returns. 63, you are not registered at all, which means you cannot file your return. So when the proper officer has no returns to scrutinize, the assessee has not reported any figures as to how much he has sold, as to what is the rate commodity he has sold, or what is the rate of tax. Then the assessing officer will have to do what is called a best judgment assessment on the basis of all the relevant material which is available or which he has gathered. Now, there is a huge body of case law on what is this best judgment assessment and what is relevant material. And the crux is this: it cannot be guesswork. An assessing officer cannot simply guess. He must have some cogent or concrete material. And if you look at Justice Sivanyanam's judgment in the Nokia case in 2015, 79 VST 137, it gives a detailed account of all the case law, at least under the sales tax regime, as to what are the contours of best judgment assessment and when a best judgment assessment is valid. Now, the department also has issued guidelines as to what best judgment assessment is, and an example given in that circular where the department has given guidelines is where you can gather the details of the other end dealers based on the return filed under section 37, that is your purchases. So that is a valid basis for best judgment assessment, the figures of the other end dealers. Or maybe your own figures for the previous year also can be a basis for best judgment assessment. So these are examples where material may be relevant. And this cannot be exhaustive. As I said, there's a huge body of case law. You can look them up. Now, there's a limitation for invoking best judgment assessment, that it is 5 years from the date on which you should have filed your annual return. That is, for example, for the year we are in 2020 right now. For the year 2020 and 2020 and 2021, that is the current assessment year, the date for filing your annual returns under section 44 is 31st December of 2021. So for any sale that you have, any supply that you have done in this year, if you have not filed your returns, or if you have not taken registration, even though you are liable to take registration in this year, then the department has 5 years from 31/12/2021 to do best judgment assessment against you. Then, in case of in case of non-filing of registered, now the option given is, or the benefit given to the assessee is, within 30 days of the best judgment assessment, the assessee can file his return, and the best judgment assessment order will be deemed to be withdrawn. So, if you have not filed your returns for this year and you are faced with the best judgment assessment order, if within 30 days, if you file your valid returns, paying your taxes along with interest, reversing ITC if it is time barred, etc., then the best judgment assessment order will be automatically withdrawn, and your returns will be accepted even if they disclose a lesser turnover, a lesser rate of tax than the best judgment assessment order. Now, the only important thing that needs to be noticed is that the section contemplates, or the provisions contemplate, a hearing only in case of best judgment assessment in the case of a unregistered dealer. A person who is not registered, and therefore, that is person falling under section 63. A person who is liable to take registration but who has not taken registration, or a person whose registration has been cancelled under 29(2) is entitled to a hearing before best judgment assessment order is passed. But a person who is registered, a person who has been given an opportunity to file his returns under section 46 within 15 days, but does not avail of that opportunity, does not have an opportunity of hearing before the best judgment assessment order is passed. This is also clarified in the departmental circular I mentioned here, circular number 129/48 of 2019. Now, the rationale for this appears to be is you had enough opportunity to file your returns and disclose your turnover and to avoid a best judgment assessment. You are a registered dealer. In spite of that, you did not. You are aware that there's a best judgment assessment proceeding because you're a registered dealer. Your portal shows that there's a best judgment assessment proceeding against you. But still, you made yourself liable for best judgment assessment. Therefore, you are not entitled to an opportunity of hearing before the best judgment assessment is passed. Now, this may or may not be a subject matter of legal challenge or constitutional challenge on the basis of arbitrariness. We will have to see, because as far as I know, any best judgment assessment procedure in all the earlier tax regimes provided for a hearing for the assessee. Another interesting provision that is another interesting clarification mentioned in this circular, which I pointed out here, is that once the best judgment assessment order is passed and you have an opportunity to file your returns within 30 days and you don't file your returns in 30 days, then the department is entitled to recover immediately after 30 days. That is, take coercive steps against you, attach your bank account. We will look at the recovery provisions later, the different options available to the department. But the department can take recovery immediately after the 30th day. Now, this may not be correct, because against any order under section 107 of the GST Act, the assessee has 90 days to prefer an appeal. So suppose you are not, you are aggrieved by the best judgment. Suppose the best judgment is based on guesswork. The assessing officer has come up with fancy figures saying, you have sold, your turnover is 100 crores. When you are a small dealer, and pass a best judgment assessment order against you and says it is based on some material, saying that a similar dealer with a similar kind of a factory has made 100 crores, therefore you are also liable to pay tax on 100 crores, then you are entitled to challenge it under section 107, and for that you have 90 days time, and therefore the department cannot restrict this, and for this 90 days time there can be no recovery. That is established law. There are several case laws which says that the time limit available for appeal to an assessee, there can be no recovery in that time limit. So the circular which says that recovery can be taken immediately after 30 days because you have not filed your returns within 30 days of the best judgment order is wrong, and it cannot undo the law that you have time till you file your appeal, which is 90 days, to avoid recovery. Now, this is best judgment assessment. Now, the last method of assessment, which is mentioned in section 211, and which is also very peculiar to GST, entirely peculiar, if I may say, to GST, is a proper officer without any notice, without any due process, without any natural justice, can pass an assessment order against an assessee, provided two things are fulfilled. He is convinced that it is in the interest of the revenue to do so, and any delay in the form of giving a notice, hearing, or following the procedure for best judgment assessment, or for scrutiny, or for determination of liability under 73 or 74 will cause loss of revenue to the department. Say, for example, the assessee is a fly-by-night operator or a bill trader. The proper officer has come to know that the assessee is planning to abscond to a different jurisdiction altogether, abroad altogether, by closing his business. Then the department can pass, the proper officer can pass an assessment order without notice, without any of the other procedures prescribed under the Act. And the additional condition is he must obtain prior permission from the Joint Commissioner or Additional Commissioner by convincing them about the reasons for this urgency. So basically, the crux here is urgency. The delay will cause loss to the revenue. Now, there are a lot of case law, not in the context of summary assessment, but in the context of provisions like provisional attachment, etc., where natural justice, due process, etc., is waived in the interest of revenue. And courts have held that these are extraordinary provisions and which have to be invoked very, very carefully in extreme circumstances, like the example that I mentioned, where the assessee is going to abscond all of a sudden, etc. Unfortunately, the section itself does not give much guidance to the assessing officer, except saying that delay will cause prejudice to the interest of the revenue. It doesn't give any illustrations or examples as to when this may happen. So my guess is that this provision may be subject to abuse by the proper officers. And any assessee can be subject to this procedure on the ground that the delay issuing notice to him will cause interest to the revenue. Now this may be scope. There may be scope for a lot of litigation here if this provision is invoked. Now another important aspect of summary assessment, which is also very peculiar to the GST, which may also lead to a lot of litigation, is that we have seen in all these provisions that that who is subject to assessment is the taxable person or a registered person. But section 64, the summary assessment procedure, allows the proper officer to treat even an unregistered person or a non-taxable person, a person who is not doing business at all, to be treated as a taxable person and pass an order against him and initiate recovery against him. And this can be done only against the person who is in charge of the goods, again, only in cases involving goods, not involving services. We know that GST covers both goods and services. So this provision of a deeming taxable person can be invoked only in the case of goods, and only when the taxable person is not traceable, and only when the deemed taxable person is the person in charge of the goods. So I'm sure you all can think of examples. A warehouse operator, you are a warehouse owner. People hire your warehouse for storing goods. It is not always necessary that you must know who is sending those goods. Of course, you may collect copies of the bills of the documents relating to the goods that may come to you. But it is not necessary that you have to directly deal with the seller or with the businessman. In many cases, these things are handled by middlemen, by brokers, by transporters. But still, if a proper officer finds that the goods available with you as a warehouse operator are liable to tax or are suspected to be goods prone to goods that are going to be sold in a manner where there is going to be evasion, that is, there are no bills for these goods. Whatever may be the suspicion of the proper officer, if he comes to your warehouse and says that these goods are liable to tax, I am not able to trace the seller, the businessman, the assessee. But since you are the person who is in charge of the goods, I am treating you as the deemed taxable person. And the warehouse owner can be proceeded against. Now, warehouse owner is just one. So this section assumes that the warehouse owner is in the know or is collaborating or is in plays a part in the supply, which in my view may not be correct. Now, warehouse owner is actually the best of the examples. Just imagine a lorry driver who is in charge of the goods. What will a lorry owner understand? What is the point of serving an assessment lorry owner? Now, a friend who I was talking with yesterday was joking even about a Swiggy driver or a Dunzo scooter driver. He is also a person in charge of the goods. So this provision, as I said, is unique to GST, may lead to a lot of litigation, and we'll have to, and it prima facie appears unfair and even unworkable, I may say. But I don't know, I may be missing something here because it seems so patently wrong. If I'm actually missing something, people are welcome to point out. Okay. So now these are the different kinds of assessment, the 5 kinds of assessment provided under the GST, which we've discussed till now: self-assessment, provisional assessment, best judgment assessment, summary assessment. Best judgment assessment and scrutiny of returns, best judgment assessment, and summary assessment. Now, as we saw, only of all these assessments, 4 of them contemplate a state assessment order. That is, best judgment assessment, there is a separate procedure, separate limitation period, there will be an order passed against you. For summary assessment, separate procedure. For provisional assessment, there is a separate procedure. For self-assessment, there is no procedure because it is based on a return. But with respect to scrutiny of returns, which is likely to be the most regular kind of assessment, because there could be discrepancy in almost every return, and assessing officers will invariably scrutinize thousands of returns. They will go for large taxpayers' returns. They look at them with microscopes to find some discrepancy. So scrutiny of returns is likely to be lead to the most volume of assessments, and there alone, as we saw, there is no separate assessment order. But if he is not satisfied with the explanation of the assessee, he has to invoke the provisions for determination of the liability under 73 and 74, which will be the last part of this assessment. But before that, since I thought that we'll just this is incidental to the procedure for assessment, and it is not really deep and not really it's something that is to be actually explained by an auditor to all of us, and even we have to learn, even I have to learn from auditors. I thought I'll just briefly show you all the provisions relating to audit before we go to the provisions regarding determination of liability pursuant to assessment, pursuant to scrutiny of returns. Audit, there are 3 kinds of audits. Audit is defined under section 213 of the Act to mean examination of records, returns, and other documents which are maintained by an assessee. Section 35 of the Act provides the documents which are required to be maintained by the assessee or furnished by the registered person under this Act, made for the time being, to verify the correctness of the following things. So the following things have to be verified in any audit: the turnover declared, whether it's correct or no; taxes paid, whether the taxes paid are correct or no; whether the refund claimed is correct or no; whether the ITC availed is correct or no; and whether the returns filed or the records are fully in compliance with all the provisions of the Act. This is the subject matter of any audit. Now, audit under the Act is there are 3 different kinds of audit. One is an annual audit, which the assessee does himself. This is mandatory for every assessee who has a turnover of about 2 crores. He has to engage an auditor, conduct an annual audit, and this audit report has to be filed along with his annual returns, which have to be filed under section 44 of the GST Act. As I said, on the 31st of December of the following of the assessment year, of the next assessment year. I'm sorry, of the 31st December of the end of the financial year. Sorry. So if now the interesting part about this is that the Act itself does not provide for a consequence for failure of an assessee to if he does not file an annual audit report along with his annual returns. It only there is a general provision under section 125 for a penalty of a maximum amount of some, if I'm not wrong, of 25,000 if you breach any provision of the Act. So at best you will be faced with that provision only if you don't file your annual audit report, or even for your annual return for that matter, because failure to file your annual audit or your annual return does not give rise to best judgment assessment under section 62 or section 63. So strictly speaking, there is no serious consequence for failure to file your annual audit report. It is only meant to help the assessing officer in scrutinizing your returns. Now, this, as I said, is the audit which happens voluntarily from this mandatorily, but from the side of the assessee. Now, the other two kinds of audits happen from the department. One is audit by the tax, or the first kind is audit by the tax authorities prescribed under Section 65. We saw that Section 65 is one of the provisions that can be invoked by the assessing officer if he is not satisfied with your explanation after a scrutiny of your returns. Under Section 62, we saw. So, if he is not satisfied with your reply after scrutiny of your returns, or on the basis of the direction of the commissioner in any other case, a tax officer, a tax department can undertake the audit of your accounts. Rule 101 gives the procedure where it should take place, how it should take place, etc. As I said, it is a matter for an auditor to teach all of us. And the third kind of audit is special audits. That is, if the officer is of the opinion that there is something wrong with your accounts, then if he is of the view that the exact word used in the act is, if he is of the view that the value has not been correctly declared, or the credit availed by you is not normal, is abnormal, is very high, then he can undertake a special audit. No, he can. Sorry, I'm sorry. I should correct myself. Special audit is also not done by the department, but is done in the direction of the department by a third-party auditor. And the department will decide. The proper officer will decide who that auditor will be, a chartered accountant or cost accountant. So in that sense, it is not done by the assessee. It is done by the department, but by a third-party auditor. Unlike audit under Section 65, which is done by the department itself. Rule 102 provides for the procedure for a special audit by third-party auditors. As I said, Section 65 and Section 66 are invocable when an assessing officer is not satisfied after scrutiny of your returns with your explanation. But those are not the only circumstances. The Section 66, Section 65 have to be read as independent provisions authorizing officers to initiate audit and on the strength of those provisions independently also, not just after scrutiny of returns. As I said, annual audit and special audit, annual audit done by the assessee and special audit done by at the instance of the department under Section 66 are to be done by CS or cost accountants, whereas audit by tax authorities is done by the department. These are the different kinds of audits. So as I said, I am keeping the explanation regarding audit brief. Now, I am just skipping the procedure and the details regarding audit. You all, as I said, I mentioned the provisions. You all can look into them and you all can decide. There is a provision for opportunity, etc. also. So I'll just now we are quickly going to go to determination of liability. The link between audit and determination of liability is that when on audit by the department, if there are any discrepancies that are found, the consequence is that the department will, the discrepancies are mentioned in 65(7), then the department will initiate proceedings under 73 or 74, which is the same.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. Before that, I think Mr. Sethu is having a few clarifications or few doubts, sir.
Sir, can I quickly, because I think I've already taken Manna, I didn't realize. I'll just quickly.
Okay, sir.
Determination of liability.
End of the session, we can just do it.
Just 5 minutes. Determination of liability alone. Actually,
Okay, sir. Okay. I will ask last, sir. No issue, sir. I will ask last.
So, actually, so Prithvi, this is something that I want to ask you, or you can ask everybody. Determination of liability is actually a detailed procedure. There are case laws, and there's a lot of provisions. I have included them in this PowerPoint presentation. Is it, since we already touched 1 hour, is it okay if we deal with it on another day, or if you all go through it and satisfied, or you want me to finish it now quickly? Can everybody? Can
Sir, I think with regard to time, it shouldn't be an issue. But then we can just take others' opinion also. So, friend, you just want him to continue with it or what? depending on your preferences. I mean, I am okay with it. Sai, what do you say?
Aditya and Prithvi, my personal opinion is, say, like you were saying, 73, 74 is a very detailed topic.
Correct.
Time is definitely not an issue. We can still go on. But I feel that we can have a separate session on this if Aditya is okay with that and if time permits for him.
Yes.
Because we can have a more detailed discussion and probably it might be a little more fruitful if we do it that way, is what I feel.
True, correct.
Even I thought so. I didn't anticipate that.
No, but even assessment is a very long topic, so it is good. We need not rush through every topic. I think we can take some time and deal with every topic in detail also.
As I said, these are actually connected topics, but they do require two separate sessions. They form part. All of it is a part of the assessment procedure together. Though they are treated under separate chapters of the Act, but like you said, we may require another session.
So I think we are getting suggestions also. They are all saying that we should have a detailed session on liability because that is also a big topic. So
either
if we rush through it, it will not probably help us. So I think we can stop with this and then we can take up a lot of questions and answers also which are coming up, so that we can complete this topic fully first.
Yes.
So thank you, sir, for taking us through assessment and audit. I mean, assessment in detail. Audit, as you said, it is just a general thing for now. I mean, slowly we will get to understand how it works. So, friends, you can please unmute and ask your queries to sir. Don't hesitate. You can ask whatever doubts you have because this is more of an interactive session. So, I think Mr. Sedu can start first. He's having quite a few doubts and clarifications also. So, Mr. Sedu, you can start first.
Okay, sir. Please. Thank you, sir. Sir, as you said, 15 days computation regarding issue of notice. Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Regarding 15 days computation, sir, already regarding VAT law, excise law, no, we received the notices through summon or letter format. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Correct, sir. Can you yes, sir.
Now every notices come through only mail, sir. How can we compute the 15 days from mail itself, sir? Please.
So this is, sir, like I said, there is a separate. I am not able to recollect. There is a separate provision regarding services under the GST Act.
Okay.
And
Okay.
an email, even putting on the portal is treated on par. Treated on par with other
Okay.
kinds of notices. So we have to examine. This is a matter which has to be agitated in courts, or maybe the provision itself has to be challenged. But the law itself is designed in such a way that an electronic communication or even putting on your portal, so it expects you to check your portal every day. So that is, it does seem unreasonable, but like you said, that involves explanation or analysis of the provisions regarding service of notice, which is a separate procedure. We will look into it, sir, separately.
Okay.
Yes. But that difficulty will be applicable for every notice, not just for your 15 notice. But you are right, 15 is a short period. But for every notice, for your assessment notice, your demand, everything, this will be an issue. For registration cancellation, so many people's registration has been cancelled notice through email and through portal.
Okay.
Section 169, Naveen has pointed out, deals with the provision for service. Now we have a peculiar provision, and we'll have to look at it on whether it is fair at all, and if it can be challenging.
Okay, another 2 more questions, sir, please.
Yes,
okay, yeah, you mentioned that regarding annual audit, 2 crores now is increased to 5 crores, sir, please.
There has been an amendment.
Yes,
okay. I forgot to mention that this.
Okay, sorry, sir. I am mentioning that.
Correct. So the annual audit mandatory for every assessee is now 5 crores and not 2 crores. There's an amendment to the section. I'm sorry.
Regarding you mentioned the special audit, sir. Yes. Special audits also, commissioner only appoint the chartered accountant or cost accountant, sir. He only nominated, he only fixed the remuneration, sir.
Correct, sir.
Assessee is not able to appoint the chartered accountant or cost accountant for the department audit, sir, please.
Correct, sir. I mentioned that. Assessee is only for your annual audit only. Assessee can choose. For special audit, the commissioner will choose who the cost accountant or chartered accountant is.
Okay. Then regarding, you told that 5 years from the annual return, sir, for assessment. But I think the provision, as per provision, now regarding 17-18 annual due days extended up to December 19, sir.
Yes.
Then we have to calculate from December 19 itself or actual due date itself, sir.
No. From the extended due date, sir. From the extended.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth sir, and thank you, Aditya sir. Anyone else who has any doubts? I think Sai also in between, when you pointed out the Bombay decision, he also supplemented it.
Sai, any contract decision or anything like that?
No, I was just saying that CEAT Limited and Bombay High Court in fact referred to Ispat that you were referring to,
Yes.
and held in the same lines. And that traveled to the Supreme Court and Supreme Court upheld it. And that was just an SLP dismissal, but still.
Correct.
So if you look at the GST provision,
Your voice is breaking.
The main provision itself says that the 1 second. So if you look at the, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So if you look at the, that interest is liable from the date of the liability. So this is similar to the excise provision. So the court said that from the date of the final assessment order. But if you look at the next sentence under the section, GST section, it says, irrespective of whether you paid before or after the final assessment order.
Correct.
Which means that the section contemplates payment before the final assessment order, means that you can technically pay it, interest can only come from the date of your original liability and not from the date of the final assessment order. So
that sentence, which, if I may just interrupt, that sentence also, I think, puts to rest a lot of debate that was happening in the earlier regime.
Yes.
On what amount I should pay interest on. That is, if there is, say, 100 rupee excess and an 80 rupee shortfall,
correct.
Should I net it off and pay only on the difference I should pay interest, or should I pay on the entire shortfall? That was also one question. So that again, this sentence which is here, which says that either before or after will put that debate to rest.
So entire shortfall.
Yes.
So
no, after the adjustment.
After the adjustment, correct. After the adjustment of whatever you paid earlier.
Exactly.
Now the only question is whether it's fair or no. We have to see. I don't know if, because whether when the earlier provision, when Ispat Industries, etc., whether it was only interpreted in the light of the provision. If you look at the Ispat Industries judgment, it only reads the provision. But if you look at the Sestat provision, suppose there is some observation regarding it being reasonable only if it is like that, then maybe it will be challenged.
Even in the earlier regime, 11AA interest rate and 11BB interest rate were drastically different. So
correct. Interest. I'm not talking about the difference in interest rate. I know the difference has always been there, but interest from the original date, because under the GST, under the sales tax, this issue is pending under the VAT. Not pending. There are some writs pending, but according to me, it is covered by a decision. Of course, which again in the context of provisions which did not have a similar line, that it can only come from, interest can only come from the date you are visited with an assessment order, or from the date on which there is a demand. EID pari edition under the old sales tax law. And the
EID pari was subsequently referred to in the sale larger bench issue, if you remember.
Yes, correct.
Which on retrospective increase in prices.
Correct.
They referred to sale larger bench, they referred to EID pari, the TN GST decision, and they say no, but the central excise provisions read otherwise.
Probably, yeah, correct.
Yeah, so we'll have to see.
The provisions are different, correct. Provisions are different.
Thanks, Sai, for supplementing this and then for adding on to few more decisions and others. So anyone else who has any more queries, you can come forward and ask. Feel free.
Okay.
Sir, we will request you to share the PPT with us.
Yeah, the PPT is very simple PPT, no formatting. So I share the PPT along with the determination of liability part,
so that we can read and come for the next session.
Read and decide whether you need a presentation at all.
No, I think most of us have a lot of questions on only the determination part.
Yeah,
correct.
Most of it is, a lot of it is controversial. Right.
Yes.
Anybody else wants to do it also? More than welcome.
No, Aditya, Jayalakshmi here. Thank you so much for such a elaborate and detailed presentation covering each and every aspect. And definitely, we'd want a presentation from you on determination of value, and also, to give us throw more light on that. And we all feel very comfortable to ask questions here. So now that we also have the syllabus in hand, we'll all read up, and it's going to be a very interactive session next time. Very looking forward to your next presentation, Aditya.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so these sessions, as Jayalakshmi has pointed out, like we're especially keeping it for all young members of the bar, so that you don't hesitate in asking any queries or something. We tend to miss out on the questions in other sessions also. So sir, I think you should definitely very soon take up the determination of liability. Probably by this week itself, we'll fix up a date. I'll check with the committee, and I will tell which date is free so we can take it up. So thank you once again. Thank you once again to all the participants who joined.